come a little closer and lend me your ears. Don't worry, you keep yours while I keep mine.
In each episode, we'll dig into the major stories, uncover the truth, and retrieve gems from Yada's blog.
We'll discuss what's right, bark about what's wrong, wag our tails at the thrill of discovery, and take you on adventures through the exciting world we live in today. So, fasten your curiosity leash and get ready.
Right then, coming to you with another episode of the Yada's Vlog on a Blog. Tomorrow's news, disseminated today. Let's dive in.
Yes, indeed. The Wook knows. This is going to be another special edition of the vlog, and that we are continuing our series, the second in many of these series, on basics. And the second basic we wish to discuss is something that is completely forgotten among Jews, certainly unknown among Christians, and, well, the Muslims wouldn't know it if it kissed them on the cheek. It's matzah. Matzah is more than a cracker. It happens to be the single most important day thus far in the history of the world. Imagine that. Most important day to God of every day in the history of the universe thus far was the fulfillment of Matzah in year 4033 CE, and not one person in a million knows anything about it. And the Jews that claim that, oh, they're Torah scholars and they've had Torah scholars going all that time, not one of them recognizes the purpose of the day or who fulfilled it or what the benefits might be. Pretty astounding, really. And I'm here to tell you, Wookiee knows more than do all the religious combined. But, you know, Rick Wookiee is a smart dog. All right, so Matzah, I'm going to begin just by chatting with you about what it's important to know. And then as time permits, we're going to go into what Yahweh has to say. I've just cultivated a few of the statements that Yahweh's made about Matzah. And well, I think it's my friend, about 40 some odd pages of notes.
It's just a brief 40 pages.
It's a brief 40 pages. And so I just happened to have collected, as I say, a small amount of Yahweh's comments about Matzah. And it's 40 pages long, which at this kind of a program would only take us about 4 hours to get through. So get comfortable. No, we're not going to go into that kind of detail. Matzah is, for you and for me, the single most important day of the year. What just is been butchered, what has been butchered by the religious, is that Passover is not a 7-day holiday, and matzah is not an ingredient for Passover. And that in Christianity, they have their man god, Twinkle Toes, that manages to do the impossible. He's not only serves as the Passover lamb without ever mentioning Passover, but the lamb comes back to life. So it's a special version of Passover where rather than the lamb being sacrificed to give everybody else life, the lamb himself comes back to life. You know, special Twinkle Toes versions of man godism, if you will. But what everybody seems to miss, because in Christianity, the man god, this mythical Jesus, well, God, it was really a taxing day on Passover. So he needed a good long nap. So he went into the tomb and he just napped on matzah. And that way he, on Easter, which is named after Ishtar, the goddess of Babylon, could do a resurrection act. And well, that sort of misses the entire purpose. In fact, that would be the antithesis of the purpose. God condemns everything that came out of Babylon, and therefore there was no Ishtar day. And of course, the Passover lamb, the body of the Passover lamb, to be Torah observant, to have fulfilled the Torah's purpose, that has to be incinerated the night of Passover, so it can't come back to life. Yeah, well, so they missed that. But there is the myth in Christianity that, oh, Jesus went into hell. Now, how could God go into hell? I don't know. They don't bother to explain that. And they don't have any testimony in their New Testament to suggest it's true. But, the whole myth of Jesus is a conglomeration of identity theft, stealing from Dode. So there's little bits and pieces that occasionally are woven into the story. Now, in Judaism, they get Passover all sorts of wrong. They make Passover a 7-day holiday. They make no association with matzah other than it's a meaningless ingredient during the process. There is no chag matzah. There's no celebration of a mikra or a moed known as matzah. They have no clue what that day represents. And so it's a mess in Judaism. And that's a real problem, because one of the reasons that God makes such a big deal over matzah, and he says that matzah is the essential day. He says that matzah, even celebrated, it's a Shabbaton, which means that it is to be treated as all things pursuant to the Shabbat. He calls it the mikre, the day to be called out. It's the day of days. And it's because after fulfilling Pesach as the AL, as the Passover lamb, Dode, and it was King David who came back to fulfill these days per his own admission. Dode's body fulfilled Passover as the lamb, allowing the Romans to crucify him, which he explained vividly in the 22nd Psalm, talking about exactly how crucifixion would kill 600 years before crucifixion was invented. And we have a copy of this scroll dating to several centuries before Dode actually fulfilled it. I mean, prophecy doesn't get better than that. And of course, we have copies of Daniel dating to 4 centuries prior to that timeline being fulfilled, where Gabriel, who is Dode, told us the exact day in 33 CE that he would complete the promise of chag matzah. And it doesn't get better than that, folks. If you're looking for absolute proof, that's it. So here is Dode. He has sacrificed his disposable body, his bashar, to fulfill Passover as the lamb, but that didn't kill Dode. This idea that that God died is been absurd in Christianity. I mean, it's just so utterly ridiculous. It's a mystery. There are 5 Christians, much less 2.5 billion of you out there. God cannot die. Men cannot kill God. So no one died on Passover. They said, well, you just said that Dode suffered crucifixion. That sure as heck killed him, right? Killed the body. This fascination that the religious have with the body, it keeps them from understanding the great depth of the story that Yahweh is telling. They miss everything that's important. They're unable to see how God can redeploy the souls that he trusts multiple times, because they get caught up in their underwear over a body dying and a body being born. Bodies are so meaningless, worthless. They're a liability. It's the soul that matters. Dode's soul did not die when he fulfilled Passover. His soul lived on. Now, his soul had a lot of work to do after fulfilling Passover by sacrificing his disposable bashar body, because after opening the door to life as the firstborn on Passover, Dode's nephesh soul carried our guilt into Sheol, which is equivalent to a black hole, a place where nothing can be seen, where nothing escapes, total darkness. And he deposited it there. And protected by the Ruach of Yahweh, he was unharmed for the experience and the Ruach enveloping his soul, which the Ruach was positioned and affirmed by Yahweh to do for Dod's entire existence, which, well, has already been just shy of 6,000 years. The Ruach protected him there, and the Ruach removed him from Sheol at the end of Matsah, so that he, as the Bakor of Yahweh, Yahweh's firstborn, could usher in the promises of Bakurim, firstborn children. So on Matzah, it's the day that is the most important, because eternal life isn't that big a deal. In fact, for most people, eternal life is counterproductive. Did you know that? If religious Jews celebrating Passover without matzah, or Christians with this pretense of a man god being killed on Passover and taking a nap on matzah, if they were to fully benefit from that sacrifice on Passover, it would be the worst possible outcome. They would become immortal, but still slathered with their guilt, and therefore prohibited from approaching God. And if you are estranged from God because of your guilt, and you are immortal, there's only one thing that God can do with you. He can't, at that point, dissipate your soul. You have to send you to Sheol. And so you will go to Sheol, the very place that you denied Dod going with his nephesh soul, because you denied matzah and you celebrated Passover. That's why God says, don't celebrate Passover unless you're in the covenant, unless you have the sign of the covenant, which is circumcision, which the New Testament hates, because Paul decided that his audience didn't like it. His audience, comprised of Greeks and Romans, didn't like circumcision. So to be popular among the Greeks and Romans, Paul decided to speak out against the sign of the covenant, and he replaced circumcision. Now, of course, couldn't replace it without contradicting God, which is a really bad idea. We replaced it with baptism, which was part of the rituals of the Roman Catholic, soon to be Roman Catholic Senate. The Sibylline oracles were the source to which he sold the idea of baptism. So bottom line here is that if you don't understand matzah and you celebrate Passover, you're in a whole world of hurt. You've made your soul immortal and still slathered with your religious and political guilt, and therefore destined for Sheol, hell, whether you believe the place exists or not. That's what you've done to yourself. Now, the solution is something that I was the first to discover. It's written all the way through the text, and it should have been obvious, but no one heretofore understood it. You see, what Dod volunteered to do is accept the guilt of every covenant member. And once his soul was burdened with it, he took it into Sheol. He went into hell for a heavenly cause. And once deposited in Sheol, guess what happens? Because nothing escapes Sheol, the guilt that we would otherwise have incurred is gone. And it's not just gone, it's destroyed, it's invisible, it's not even retrievable, never to be seen again. And if all of our guilt is taken from us, how do we look? That would be innocent, wouldn't it? And so there's no judgment. You don't even need to be saved, because your guilt is gone. It's a stroke of genius by Yahweh to have conceived this, that he opens the doorway to life into his home by his son fulfilling Pesach. And then he has his beloved son with his nephesh soul carry our guilt into Sheol to deposit it there, never to be seen again. All we have to do is stop being religious and capitalize on what Dod has done and what Yahweh enabled through him. And there we are. We are immortal, and we are not guilty, and therefore we can be ourselves completely open and exposed in front of Yahweh. Brilliant. That means You can do what you need to do. You can be engaged in this process of sharing what you know about God, and you're not worried about every little slip up because it's irrelevant. God can't even see them. They're all gone. They're just perfect. And from God's point of view, perfect only in the sense of all of your guilt is completely gone. So that is the purpose of Pesach and Matzah, and what Matzah represents in the order of things, and how Dode enabled it in 33 CE. And yet, nobody. And prior to me recognizing it, understanding the motivation for it, explaining the process for it, and then proving it in the 35 books that I have written and through these programs, no one knew that it was Dode, the very Son of God, his Messiah, our Savior, the former and returning King, God's chosen one, the one God says through whom he enabled and cut the covenant, is Dode. And that he, through Daniel, foretold the exact day in 33 CE, 4,000 Yah, that he himself would fulfill Chag Matzah, and he did. And it's all there. And then you read Psalms like 22 and 99. You read Isaiah 9 and 53. Any place you turn to the first 30 Mizmor, particularly the 89th, and they all say the same thing. Dode is the one. He did these things. Now that means that Jesus Christ is nothing but a goddamn lie. Yeah. Rather than being your God, rather than being your Lord, rather than being your King, rather than being your Savior, he's a satanic deception. He's worse than just mildly counterproductive. Is the most egregious counterfeit ever conceived. Because that lie, this bit of replacement foolology, was placed right on top of the truth. And in so doing, billions were led astray and millions of Jews have been harassed. Yeah, the Jews were even harassed by Christians for killing their mythical God. I mean, how stupid can a religion be? This is Matzah. If you're looking to celebrate it, first of all, make certain that you are circumcised. You can't celebrate Pesach, and Pesach is the first day of Matzah. Second of all, make sure that you know who Dode is, who Yahweh is, and what the purpose of this day actually is. And then you should know that it's the day following Pesach, which is the evening of the beginning, actually, of the 14th day of the month, which is the sunset on the 13th from our calendar. And that timing would be for Pesach. Matzah is simply the next day. And so Matzah at sunset this year, it'll be a Saturday evening at sunset. We'll celebrate Matzah. There is no designated meal, although God does bring up his three animals that are symbolic of the men who make the sacrifices to make the Moedim beneficial for us. He mentions, of course, the lamb, which he will often call a ram, the bull, and the goat. But we always stay with a high propensity to barbecue various cuts of lamb throughout the process. Like we'll do lamb chops on Passover, so that what we don't eat, or rack of lamb we don't eat, we can incinerate and show that we respect that part of the process, which of course is direct repudiation of Christianity, where they want the lamb to be in a grave so it can have bodily resurrection when Yahweh says incinerate it. So we'll do that. And then on matzah, there is no instruction that whatever you don't, as a family, finish eating on matzah, you can have leftovers throughout the rest of the week. The only instruction is no yeast and continue to eat unyeasted bread. Now, in this regard, matzah is unyeasted bread. It's not unleavened bread. While yeast is a leavening agent, we're not talking about baking powder here. It's talking about yeast. Yeast is a natural fungus. And as a fungus, it permeates many things. It's what causes the alcohol in beer and wine. And it causes the bread to puff up. Yeast is, chametz is the Hebrew word. It means to embitter. And from God's point of view, religious and political guilt makes us bitter from Yahweh's perspective. And so it's the yeast that is symbolic of religion and politics that God wants removed from our souls so that when it's carried to Sheol, we're not just constantly doubling down and adding to the burden, that we stop being religious and political and allow on Matzah Dod to carry our guilt away, and therefore we are innocent from God's eyes. That is the purpose of this day. Now, with that in mind, I'd like to share some thoughts about what God had to say about matzah, because some things will surprise you. The first of those is that Jews are wont to believe that that they were freed from Mitzrayim, Egypt, and the political and religious tyrants of Egypt on Passover, but that's not true. On Passover, they had a lovely meal, and they stayed in Mitzrayim in their homes by God's instruction that night. They did not leave the political and religious harassment of Mitzrayim, which means crucibles of man's political and religious oppression and trouble until Matzah. So Matzah is the day that celebrates our freedom, but freedom from what? And the answer to that is freedom from religion and politics. You see, the first requirement to participate in the covenant is to walk away from Babel, from this intermixing and confusing commingling of truth and lies that is the very essence of politics and religion. And so it's on Matzah that we are disassociated from those things. We walked away from those things. And it's the middle of the 3 days, while Matzah, Chag Matzah, is a 7-day celebration, the first 3 days. And Yahweh constantly reminds us this. When we're talking about Mitzrayim, he's speaking through Moshe and saying, you know, let my people go. They're going to celebrate a 3-day feast with me. Pesach, Matzah, Bakodim, first 3 days of Chag Matzah. And on Bakodim, we are, as I have shared, we become the firstborn children of the covenant, following Dod's example, who is Yahweh's Bakor, firstborn. So let's read a little bit about what God had to say. He said, and this begins from called out. It's from Korah. It's been corrupted to Leviticus 23:1. And Yahweh spoke these words to Moshe in order to promise and say. That's a pretty good start. And that's something that, again, you will not find ever mentioned, not in Christianity. Christianity never once says, and Yahweh spoke these words. Never once. Guess why? Because Yahweh never spoke any of the words that became the Christian New Testament, not one of them. There is no mention of Yahweh and no statement, and Yahweh spoke these words, ever. But when you read the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, what you read very often is Yahweh said, Yahweh spoke these words. This is what Yahweh conveyed. It is ubiquitous in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, and it is non-existent in the New Testament and the Talmud because Yahweh didn't inspire either. So Yahweh, which is transliterated based upon the title Eloah, God, as directed by his Torah, instructions and teaching, and his Haya, existence. Those words all tell us exactly how to pronounce God's name. Spoke these words to Moshe, which is a name that means to call out, in order to promise and say, under the auspices of free will, convey the word, Dabar, choose to share this empowering message of God on behalf of the children of Yisrael. Oh, you say, well, for those Israelis. I'm not Israeli, so it doesn't pertain to me. Good. See you later. Goodbye. You can't be covenant if you're estranged from Israel. So goodbye. It doesn't apply to you. I get it. Go away. Stop listening. Has no value to you. Doesn't pertain to you. God doesn't pertain to you. Heaven doesn't pertain to you. The covenant doesn't pertain to you. It's make the most of this life because that's all you're going to get. And oh, by the way, don't be religious because, well, then you'll get eternal life, but not in a very happy place. So Yisrael means those who engage and endure with God. If you're not among them, no sweat. This message does not apply for you. Turn the page, go listen to somebody else. There's lots of anti-Semites out there and religious wackos that will tickle your ears, I'm sure. So speak to the children of Israel, of God, on behalf of the children of Israel, and say to them, the Moedim. The Moedim. Where do we hear that? Where's the first time that Moedim appears in God's voice? I know. Do you know what the first time Moedim appears in God's voice? In fact, if you're listening to this, do you even know what a Moedim is? Do you know what Ed is in Hebrew, or an M ending in Hebrew, or a Ma preface in Hebrew? How about if I just break it down and I'll share with you the component parts, then I'll tell you where you can find it. Ma is an interrogatory. It means to ponder the implications of something. Ed is a restoring witness to the eternal testimony. And M is plural, in that there are more than one of them. So the Moedim, the eternal witnesses to the restoring testimony of the appointed meeting times. These are not only the scheduled meetings and appointments to gather together and be with God, whose name is Yahweh, and to be on the path that God has provided for us to go from the world of men to his world, his realm, to go from 3 dimensions to 7 dimensions, to walk from the darkness into the light, to bypass death on the way to eternal living. But they also represent 7 annual events each year. And there are 3 people who participate in fulfilling them. Principally 2, but there is a very noble assist from a 3rd. The first 3, the spring Moedim, were all fulfilled by Dod in 33 CE, the very Son of God. Pesach, Matsah, and Bikurim. The next 2 are also harvest following Bikurim, which is a harvest of firstborn children. It's also a barley harvest. But Shabuah, it's a harvest of mature wheat. And wheat's plural. There'll be Goyim and there will be Yehudim. 2 loaves of bread symbolizing them, but it's mature, standing grain. And so the next harvest is Shabuah. Following Shabuah is Teruah. And following Teruah, we have Kippurim and Sukkah. And it is one of the 2 more highly known, should be known, individuals who fulfills both Shabuah and Teruah, and will be there with Dod when he returns with Yahweh on Kippurim. And it is the 3 of them, if you will, being in the sense of Yahweh, Dod, and Yada, who will be there to guide the mortal remnant as they enter the garden during Sukkah. So the Moedim are essential to us. The first time that Moedim is mentioned by Yahweh happens to be in the first chapter of the first book of the Torah. So he doesn't mess around when it comes to Moedim. It's really essential. And what he says is there will be two fellas, a greater and lesser luminary. And he says that both luminaries are great from his point of view. One's a little younger than the other. But a greater and lesser luminary who will serve as signs as they volunteer to fulfill the Moedim, the restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony. That's what we're talking about here. And without these luminaries serving to fulfill the Moedim and directing your attention to them as signs, there's no way to approach God. There's no way to know him, no way to engage in a relationship with him, no way to enter heaven. Your body is stuck on earth for whatever period of time it lives, and your soul will either dissipate to nothingness or endure an eternity in Sheol, depending on how religious or political you may have been. So the Moedim, these restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony, are to show the way to the benefits of the relationship, Asher. You are continually and genuinely invited to attend. Kara. Kara is the basis of Mikra, which is the other term, title that Yahweh uses to describe these 7 annual meetings. He will call them Moed, which are the restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony regarding the set appointments, and the Mikra, which are invitations to be called out and meet with God. Kara is the verbal root. So you are continually and genuinely invited to attend. The continually and genuinely happen to be from the call and the imperfect, as they shape the meaning of the verb. To attend them as set apart, mikre. Remember I told you that kara is the verbal root of mikra, and mikre is the plural of mikra. You know, God is trying to underscore that point. He said, kara, mikre. And the only difference between kara and mikra, the single version of the term, is it is prefaced by a my. And my in Hebrew is the other form of interrogatory. Interrogatory means to ask questions that cause you to contemplate the meaning of something. So it's ponder the implications of being invited to be called out and meet with God. That's what mikre means. Is there a mikre in Christianity? No. How about a mikre in Judaism? No. Is there a moedim in Christianity or Judaism? Nope. They don't use those terms, do they? Because they don't celebrate them. They don't benefit from them. And if you're not celebrating them, you're not benefiting from them, well, your soul has a 0% chance of salvation. None. These are, God, here's the bringing right back the same term. He wants you to know that the mikre, these are moedim, ani. Oh, those idiots out there, particularly the Twistians that say, oh, the feast, they're Jewish feasts. Go to hell. They're not Jewish feasts. What does God say here? These are ani moedim. These are my restoring witnesses to the eternal meetings, which is why God began the first chapter of the first book of the Torah, telling you about the greater and lesser luminaries serving as volunteers to fulfill and signs to direct your attention to the Moedim. The Moedim are Yahweh's. If you don't want to answer the invitation to Pesach, Matsah, Bakurim, Shabuah, Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah, that's your call. But understand, you are turning God down. He invited you to meet with him, and you're saying, nah, I'd rather be religious. I want to hang here with my pretend man god, Jesus, or Bar Kokhba, or hang around Maimonides, the Rambam, or Rabbi Akiba, the nitwit, that was so stupid that he caused the diaspora and caused the land to be renamed Palestia. No, God's not kidding around here. These are not Jewish holidays. I know that the Jews, they'll claim, oh yeah, they're the Jewish holidays. No, they're not. First of all, the Jews don't celebrate Matzah or Bikurim, and they celebrate Pesach all wrong. They don't celebrate Shabuah. They have renamed Teruah as the Babylonian head of the year in Rosh Hashanah. They've turned Yom Kippurim, which is the day of reconciliations, into a day of afflictions and of abusing themselves, well, abusing chickens too. And Sukkah is a day for them to build huts, little huts that they hang around in the afternoon, midday doing nothing. Not a day of huts. Sukkah is a day that a mortal remnant of Yisrael will be re-invited or be invited to return to the garden for 1,000 years so they can demonstrate that they're worth God allowing them to leave this planet, empowering them, enriching them, enabling them. So these are the Moedim. They have virtually none of them are celebrated. There's only two actually that are, or three that are acknowledged of the seven. There's three of them that are acknowledged by Jews. They miss the single most important in Matzah because it removes religion. They ignore Bikurim entirely because, well, it's been stolen by those Twistians. They ignore Shabuah because it was claimed by Twistians as Pentecost and the birth of their church, and some of the most stupid analysis you'd ever see, justifications. They've corrupted Teruah to the Babylonian Rosh Hashanah. They will at least acknowledge a Yom Kippur, even though it's plural, it's Kippurim. But when they do it, they turn it into a day of affliction as opposed to a day to reconcile the relationship and a homecoming. And they've turned Sukkah into running around with some sour fruit and the four species and building huts. It's stupid. But these are the Moedim. These are the Moedim of Yahweh. They are Yahweh's, my witnesses to the appointed meeting times. Then this says, for 6 days, she shall act in the service to the spiritual messenger. There is a malak. A malak in Hebrew is a spiritual messenger. It's not always a spiritual messenger, though. A malak can be an individual, and very often is an individual. And the ending doesn't make the term necessarily feminine. There are many, many, many titles that Yahweh applies to men that have the ending. And what he typically means by it, if it's a title and it has the ending, is that the understanding of what is happening here in terms of being an envoy, messenger from God, is that in the ending, it is more comprehensive. It's just like if you're a man, by the original design, you're exceptionally reasonable, but maybe not very emotional. Your ability to express emotions may be truncated. If you're a woman, you may have lots of compassion and be quite emotional, but may not be quite as rational. Was the original design anyway. But by taking a masculine term and putting the ending at it, it's like creating a person like Dode. And what you see in Dode is he was exceedingly cerebral, while also very passionate and emotional. So it's a way of taking a word and making it more comprehensive. So this is an exceedingly important messenger conveying the message of God that is spiritually enabled, the Malaka. Then on the seventh day, there will be a Shabbat observance, a Shabbaton. Shabbaton is important for you to know here. And I know I'm going way past what we would normally consider, all right, just give me the basics of what matzah represents. But I want to use matzah as a special case where we take something that is essential to your knowledge and show how much can be understood about it. And here God is saying it's a Shabbaton. The reason Shabbaton is important for you is that there are many words that God uses that have the own ending. Zikaron is an example. Elion is another example. When God uses Shabbaton, he is telling us something that's important. There's another place where he uses Adam, and he has the own suffix placed at the end of Adam. So in Shabbaton is the first place you're going to encounter such a thing. And what it tells you is that the own ending means that it's everything that pertains to a Shabbat. So a Shabbaton is to consider everything associated with the promise and purpose of the seventh day, Shabbaton. Elion, which El meaning almighty, the Y being the very hand and influence, and On mean all things pertaining to, would be all things pertaining to the hand and influence of God. Dod is called Elion. Zakaron, Zakar would be a memorable man, and Zakaron would be all things pertaining to the most memorable of men. When God says of Dod, the first time we're introduced to him, just the moment he introduces Dod by name, he said that Dod, the single most important trait for us to understand about Dod, is that he is all things pertaining to Adam. Adam, Mon. All things pertaining to Adam. Dod was Adam. Adam is Dod. Same soul. Very important lesson. I hope that it resonates with you because it's exceedingly important for you to understand it so that you can understand God's message. So it's a Shabbat observance, a Shabbaton, to consider everything associated with the promise and purpose of the seventh day, of a set-apart nature, Kodesh. So he's talking about Matsah, and he's this celebration of Chag Matzah, and it's set apart. It's Kodesh, which means it's not religious, it's not political. It is set apart unto God. He is saying that it's not only a Moedim, a restoring witness to the eternal testimony, but that it's his. He's saying that twice he said that it's a Moedim, which is a restoring witness to the eternal testimony. He says that it's a Shabbat and a Shabbaton, all things pertaining to the message of the seventh day and of God's promise. And then he says it's a Mikra. It is an invitation to be called out and meet. He has unloaded the full McGillicuddy of affirmations of a day. Just throw in McGillicuddy. It's not actually a Hebrew term. And then he says that, guess who? The Malaka, this heavenly implement, this envoy who is spiritually empowered, will be occupied with the business, the mission, and the purpose of this day, doing everything such that you do not have to do anything. Yeah, that's the thing. I'm asked all the time, what do I need to do so that I can do Passover and Matzah correctly? And I said to you, you need to understand that Yahweh working through Dod and then conveying the message through the Malaka and the Zakaron have done everything that needed to be done correctly and have conveyed it accurately. Benefit from it. Listen, think, understand, and then respond. You know, we have this marvelous example in Hezekiah. They lost the Torah for years. They became very religious. A copy of the Torah comes up. It's really rough times, and the province of Yehuda, the kingdom of Yehuda, the kingdom of Yisrael, the northern kingdom is already gone. The Assyrians have done them in. And now you've got the Assyrians coming down, and they're threatening Jerusalem as the capital of Yehuda. And they find a copy of the Torah, and Hezekiah, king, reads it and says, oh, holy crap. I'm sure that's a technical term too, but it says that if we're religious, we're anti-God. that God does not want us to be religious, and we got religious crap everywhere. And he realizes that it's coming up as time to celebrate Pesach, Matzah, and Bokurim, the spring Moedim. And he tells God, listen, I understand this is what we should be doing. We got to get rid of all the religiosity because there's no purpose of having a day that removes our religious guilt if we're still surrounded by religious guilt. So we got to get rid of the religious stuff. And then once we do, I've got to get enough people, particularly the priests, up to speed so they know how to convey the intent of this so that people can capitalize on it. I can't do that in the time remaining. Can I have a 2-week extension? You betcha. No problem. It was so much fun. They said, hey, God, can we do it again? How about if we just do it again? Okay, do it again. God's not hung up on you being precise with your timing. He's not hung up on you being precise with your menu. He's hung up that you know what occurred and how to capitalize upon it. And at that point, they did not know that Dode was going to fulfill it. We do now. If you want to capitalize on it, you need to appreciate that. So it is a Shabbat observance to approach Yahweh, to live and abide throughout time. You want to know what the Mikra of Matzah represents? Chag Matzah. Chag means it's a party, a celebration. It is a Shabbaton, a Shabbat, all things pertaining to the promise of 7, a Shabbaton to approach Yahweh and to live and abide throughout time. It's an invitation to meet with God. It is a restoring witness to the eternal testimony. And if you're a Christian, that's all tossed away because Paul hated God. He hated the Torah. He hated all of this. And because of his repulsive, demon-controlled life, he has fooled billions of people into turning their nose at what God established, making it Jewish holidays, to be despised, to be demeaned among Christians, with Jews being demonized by them. And with God's own people, they've been worse. Worse. There isn't a single one of the Moedim that they celebrate in a way that will do them any good. And most of them they completely ignore. So they either twist them to the point that they have no purpose, or they ignore them. And therefore, there is no way to approach Yahweh. That's not a problem for Judaism because they've erased his name and they don't like him anyway. He doesn't like them, so no problem. But if you want to live and abide throughout time, it is the only way. If you do not capitalize on Chag Matzah, Pesach, Matzah, and Bokurim, with Pesach opening the doorway to life, Matzah removing your guilt, Bokurim being your adoption papers into the covenant where you're enriched and empowered, then you are going to have your soul dissipated the moment you die. No reward, no punishment, but no eternal life. The only way to it, well, according to God, I guess he should know, is through Chag Matzah, Pesach, Matzah, and Bokurim. That's Korah, called out, Leviticus 23:3. Then he says, these godly, eternal witnesses to the appointed meetings. Moed. Of Yahweh. Not of the Lord, not of Hashem, not of those Jews, not of Israel, of Yahweh. These godly, Elie, eternal witnesses to the appointed meetings, these restoring witnesses to the everlasting testimony of Yahweh are set apart, which means they are not religious. They are not political. They're uncommon. Separating. Invitations to be called out and meet. Mikre. It's welcoming summons to read and recite, to call out, to pronounce the name, and to proclaim the purpose of the relationship. Mikra from Mai to ponder the implications of Kara, being invited, being summoned, meeting, greeting, being welcomed, being called out, reading and reciting, which to receive the benefits of the relationship, Asher. You are invited to attend, to be called out and to be welcomed. Kara. I mean, God has done everything he can to tell you the basis of the words he's using. And yet the religious have screwed all of this up. You are invited to attend. You've been summoned to be called out and to be welcomed, drawing near through them at Moed him, at the appointed time of the restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony. Kara called out, never should have been called Leviticus. 23:4. I mean, if that doesn't get your attention, then you're just in the wrong place. I mean, I'm doing this program to help people understand the basics of coming to know Yahweh and engaging in a relationship with him. And Matsah is the basic of basics. And yet, if you think they're Jewish holidays, you don't think it matters, you think your Jesus Christ solved all of that, I mean, please go away. Now, I'd shut your effing mouth, because if you open it and you protest otherwise, you're going to punch your ticket to hell. These are not Jewish holidays. They haven't been nailed to a cross. They are God's instructions, and he does not change. He says they are eternal for all time. Now, I'm not trying to sell you on them. If you're uncomfortable with it, again, go away. I am not inviting you to them. I'm telling you they're God's invitations. You either respond or you don't. And you don't get to say, yes, but. You don't get to negotiate and say, I still want to be a Christian. I'm going to find a Christian interpretation of this. Well, what if I rename Jesus as Yeshua or Yeshu or whatever they want to chew him? No, you don't get to change them. They are God's. He and his beloved Son, and soon their chosen herald, paid dearly to deliver these invitations. And you don't want to capitalize on it? That's fine. We're not looking for quantity, but instead for quality. So, in the first month, Kodesh, time of renewal, on the 14th day, for the purpose of understanding, bien. Bien is a word that says, if you want to comprehend something, you need to make the connections between things that enable that. If I give you a formula and you know one aspect of the formula, but you don't make the connection between each ingredient and element of that formula, you are never going to understand the conclusion. And if I even give you the answer, but I don't tell you the formula that got us there, won't be of any benefit to you. You won't comprehend it. That's the whole idea of these basics. I could give you the answer. I could say Matzah is the celebration of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, and it is on the 15th day, which it begins at the 14th day at sunset of the first month, which is Abib, and it is called unyeasted bread, which is to remove yeast from our souls, and it is the means that God devised to purge our souls of guilt. Not one person in a billion could capitalize upon it. Because to be in, you have to have a foundation of knowledge, and then you have to have the wherewithal to have somebody explain to you the connection between these various things, like the words that I have shared with you. And then when that happens, you're in a position to go from knowing, which is very rare today, very few people know, to understanding, which is rarer still, by making these connections. So for the purpose of understanding, at twilight, that would be ha'arab, at sunset. Sunset is when the day begins, when Passover begins. It begins at sunset. This year, Pesach will begin on Friday evening at sunset. I know that rabbinic Jews are going to celebrate it on Thursday evening at sunset. There's really no justification for that, because the first renewing light on the moon is less than 1% of the moon's surface on 14 days prior to that, which would be the first of Abib, if it could be seen. And second of all, it occurs after sunset. And anytime something occurs after sunset, it's the next day. So they're wrong this time. It is Friday evening, not Thursday evening will be Passover. And so he's saying that the 14th day of the month at twilight is Pesach, it's Passover. According to that other, who's that guy again? He's so authoritative. I mean, he's acting like he's like the creator of the universe, or belongs to him or something. Yahweh, that was the guy's name. According to Yahweh, you may want to listen to him. He does just happen to be God. And during the 15th day of this same month, 15th day, it would be the 15th day of Abib. I shared in our last program how to calculate Abib, but if you forgot, it is essentially the renewing light on the moon surface that would be observable prior to sunset on the renewing light of the moon that would be nearest the vernal equinox, which is right around the 20th to 22nd of March on our current calendars. And we know this because that's the time when the initial barley harvest, the winter barley, would be harvestable. It could be sickled, is right around this time. It's also the time that flax is in bloom. And so God gave us the time of year based upon these things. So Abib is the first month of the Hebrew year. It's when the winter barley crop is green, still growing, but ready to be sickled. And it turns out that it's the renewing light on the moon's surface closest to the winter, the spring equinox, in the 20th to 22nd of March. And it can move. It can be 2 weeks prior to that or 2 weeks after that. It can never be more than 2 weeks from that time, because the full lunar cycle is 29 and a half days. So it's going to be within 2 weeks of that time, always, without fail. In this particular case, the new moon and the spring equinox, they were almost coterminous. So there's no question as to which month we're talking about. And it's all to approach Yahweh. 7 days you should eat bread without yeast. Oh, 7 days. No, we've already been told that the first day of this is Passover, the 14th day. And so beginning on Passover, you eat unyeasted bread. Pretty simple instruction, right? Eat unyeasted bread for 7 days. And the Chag Matzah is a 7-day celebration. So eat unyeasted bread for 7 days, matzah. Now, I happen to have an affinity for matzah. You check my house, my office, my kitchen. Which you're going to see. There's boxes. I have a special brand that I happen to like, that my favorite, and they're everywhere. And my wife, dear Leah, she is a matzah maker. She makes matzah that is like 10 times better than the store brand. But she's not making it every night of every year. So I have my own as well. And if you were to go into our kitchen, probably at any time, 90% of the time when you're in our kitchen, what you're going to see is that we have a little glass bowl of very special olive oil that is mixed with our favorite mix of bitter herbs. And we eat it for a snack, eat it with dinner, but we have it 12 months of the year. There is no rule here that says you can't enjoy this all year round. It just says for the 7 days of Chag Matzah, beginning on Pesach, 14th day of the first month of the Hebrew year, you are to do this, and we do this during that time, but we kind of have the Hezekiah treatment. We say, yeah, that was pretty good. Like we eat lamb all year round too. So 7 days you shall eat bread without yeast, which, as I say, we have a tendency to expand upon. The first, foremost, and primary day is a set apart and cleansing invitation to be called out and meet. It is a mikra, invitation to be called out and meet. What happens? Somebody hands you an invitation. What do? Do you throw it away? You say, oh God, that invitation, that came from the dastardly Jews, and we hate the Jews because they killed our God. The invitation is now coming from Yahweh, a name you may not recognize, but he just happens to be God. He is offering an invitation to call you out of the world of men, call you out away from the world of religion and politics, and to meet with him. What do you think would be the appropriate response to that? I know, tough question, isn't it?
Show up.
Show up, respond, huh?
Respond. Crying out loud.
We're crying out loud. God actually answers the question that I asked, just in case people weren't very bright. He says, you may want to answer the invitation, but that's up to you. You can do what you want to do, but don't pretend that it doesn't apply to you because your Jesus nailed the Torah to the cross, because there was no Jesus and no such thing has happened. And it's for you to approach, God says, la atam. You shall not consistently perform any of the duties of the spiritual messenger, the Malaka. Listen, I was initially drawn to the idea when it comes to this Malaka, that maybe because it was Malak, which is a masculine spiritual messenger. And that means that person could be an ordinary messenger, a messenger that is representing heaven, a spiritual messenger, or a person who has the very spirit of Yahweh inside of them, would qualify as a spiritual messenger. And I was, first when I saw this word, and it was always rendered as work, and in most translations, but the verb "you should not work" would be lo asha. Asha means to do, so lo asha would mean you should not work. And if you're looking for a good Hebrew word for work, it would be obadah, which was the one that I shared here earlier. The duties, that would be the effort, the labor, the expenditure of energy. Obadah is the Hebrew word for work. Malak, and with the feminine ending, malaka, is not a Hebrew word for work. It's the Hebrew word for messenger, and there is no arguing that point. That is a fact. What the only issue is the ending, because the ruach of Yahweh is feminine, and that ruach of Yahweh was in Dod. The ruach of Yahweh is in the choder. Is it because of that? Or is it because of what we have seen in so many Hebrew words that are titles that are ascribed to God's most responsible men? That the ending makes that title more comprehensive, that this is a very full expression of who that spiritual messenger would be. And in this case, as it relates to this spiritual message, that is being delivered, both of the two men that God deliberately says, my spirit is in them. My spirit is guiding them and protecting them and inspiring them, that they are the two individuals that are the most engaged in doing the work of fulfilling these mikre, these moedim, because Dod fulfilled the first three, Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. I fulfilled Shabuah and Teruah. And, Shabuah is fine in cultivating the harvest. Teruah begins with the gleaning. Great. But the next part of Teruah is the sacrifice of the Adam Parah, where I'm butchered, just like Dod was on Pesach. And so We're all in. We are major contributors to this story. And depending on which one you are observing, Pesach, Matzah, Bikurim, the spiritual messenger is dubbed. If you're observing Shabua and Teruah, it's me. If it's me telling you it's me, if that bothers you, then fine. I don't really care. Listen, I made a commitment with Yahweh that I would go where his words lead. He speaks of what I'm doing on your behalf upwards of 1,000 times. I'm not going to ignore it. I'm not going to run from that responsibility. God has a very difficult time finding anyone who will have the stick-to-itiveness to listen to him over a long period of time, thoughtfully contemplate what he has said, respond appropriately, and then see it through. Do what needs to be done until the job is finished. As a matter of fact, if you go all the way through human history, you're going to find a grand total of 2 people that meet that criterion. And one of those 2 gave up and had to be inspired by the other one to finish the job. So if you want to give me flack over that, great. Bring it on. See if I care. I can tell you what I know. I can tell you how to meet God. I can bring you right to his presence. And if you pass on all of this, but you're still qualified to be among that mortal remnant 7 years from now, I can purge you of your guilt so that you can move on into the millennial celebration of Sukkah and re-enter the garden and prove yourself then. It's your call. I'm not here to sell you on anything. You can listen, you can capitalize, or you can go away. Again, we are not recruiting. I'm explaining. What you do with the information is up to you. But I would be careful. Because if you want to challenge what I'm telling you and you want to speak against it, there's a consequence for that. You should not consistently perform. You should not do any of the duties of the spiritual messenger. Now, you can look at that spiritual messenger as Dode, who has already fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, or you can look at that messenger as the one who's speaking to you now and explaining to you what these days represent and how to capitalize on them. But when God goes and does things, he picks a person. He doesn't pick a team. He can have a team of people supporting that person, which he does in this case, and even did for Moshe. And he did often for Dode. But he's all in with one person, one at a time. So you can look at this either way you'd like. He goes on to say, now approach and come near to be present with, approach, draw close, karab, the manifestation of God's fiery light, Isha, to be near Yahweh for 7 days. I'm going to end this program by explaining this, and then we're going to move on, and I'm going to make this particular basic presentation of Matzah at least 2. I might even go to 3, because it is the seminal day. If you understand everything that I'm sharing with you on Matzah, then you're in a position to go to Yada Yahweh, where every one of the 35 books is available free, and read them and learn and respond, and then prove yourself worthy. That's your opportunity. And if you listen to everything I'm going to share with you, and God's going to tell you about Matzah, then you are on a wonderful start in that direction. And if you are already covenant, then this is reinforcing things that are important for you to know and for you to share. And so we may turn this presentation of Matzah into 3 programs, because God has a lot to say on it. So this says now, approach, come near, to be present with. Karab, that's all Karab means. It doesn't mean offer a gift. And Isha doesn't mean burnt offering. I know that's the way they're rendered in almost every translation, but their translations are rubbish. Karab means to draw near. It means to approach, to be present, not to offer a present. It was written in the Hiffel Perfect. And that means that the person who is speaking is encouraging the person who is listening to act in a manner that is consistent with the person who is speaking. The person who is speaking, oh, he's that same God fellow, that Yahweh fellow. He wants us to be more like him. That's what the Hiffel stem would be. Perfect means this is not something that you need to do all the time. This is a specific request for a finite period of time. In this case, it was for 7 days. What is it that we're supposed to approach? It says the Isha. And Isha in Hebrew can mean woman. So my guess is not saying approach the woman. And it can mean fire from a written again with a feminine ending. But what is, again, the lesson of the feminine ending? It's something that I'm positive I'm the first to deduce and sharing with you, but it's because I've been doing this for a quarter of a century. And Yahweh has enabled my understanding with the 7 spirits of Yahweh as articulated in Yeshaya Isaiah 11, if you'd like to check that out. Ishe means all things pertaining to, a more comprehensive appreciation of, a fuller application of the concept of fire. Ish is fire. Isha would mean a more pronounced understanding of the fire, more complete appreciation of the fire and the fiery light, to be near Yahweh for 7 days. Why would God say that? Do you know why God would say, I want you to approach and come near during Matsah, the fiery light for 7 days? Why would he say that? What is the metaphor of fire? He's not asking you to walk into the fire. He's asking you to approach the fire. Ever done a campfire where you've gone out with other people to roast, I don't know, hot dogs, marshmallows? I guess you can't have hot dogs and marshmallows if you're Jewish, because the rabbi said, oh, you can't mix, dairy and meat. But that doesn't have any such rules. You can have a weenie roast and marshmallow roast and put them on the same stick if you want to. I don't know. That would be particularly fun, but I love campfires. I love the smell of them. I love the warmth of them. And here I know that come Friday evening, I've got my fire pit out there. I got my logs. We're gonna have fire. But for 7 days, we're gonna have fire to Yahweh. Celebrate what he is asking here. Why did God say to approach me, to be near me for these 7 days, that you should approach the manifestation of the fiery light? Why? I've explained this before. It's profoundly important. What does fire do? Fire takes decaying, dead, organic matter, and it transforms it into energy and light. What is God offering us through Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim? He's offering to take these physical bodies and remove them as a liability, just as the Passover lamb gave his physical body away. It didn't do any good. It's a liability. And his then nephesh, soul, surrounded by the spirit of Yahweh, the Ruach of Yahweh, was surrounded by a manifestation of light and energy. And when our bodies are gone and our souls are enveloped in light and energy, which is the symbol of all of this, by transferring and transforming us from physical beings trapped in 3 dimensions and unable to get off this planet and to live any length of time or to have any sense of real empowerment, to being souls surrounded by light and energy as opposed to limiting physical bodies. Transforming us by this evolution from decaying physical matter to empowering, enlightening, elevating, purifying light and energy. Oh, fires purify. You put water over a fire, it will remove the pathogens. You put dross over a fire, and you will end up with the separation of the value and the value of the thing that you're trying to separate in, and that which you're going to throw away. The heat of the fire and the smoke of the fire go up; they elevate. You put a fire underneath a balloon that you can float above the land, and it will take you up, and you'll float in the sky, because the warm air is lighter than the cooler air, and you're elevated. It will elevate you. If it's a dark night, that fire burns bright. It will enlighten you. And so there's so many marvelous metaphors associated with fire, but the most important is the transformation from being restricted by a 3D body and being enveloped in spiritual energy and fire and light, so that your soul can be enriched and empowered. That's what E = MC squared means. That's the only way that we become immortal. It's the only way we can get from being trapped in 3 dimensions to go into 4, which is time, 5, 6, into 7, and enter the spiritual realm, is to approach this manifestation of God's fiery light, which is the very way that he transforms us. It's the gift of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. It's where we end up at the end of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, so we can draw near Yahweh. And he is telling us to do this for 7 days. What a marvelous picture. Now, I want to tell you, that's not worth an hour of your time. I don't know what you need, what you want to hear. This comes directly from God. And he has just told you that Matzah represents the 7 most important days of your life every year. And it's the only way to extend your life and to approach Yahweh. So, I thank you for listening and look forward to presenting the basics of Matzah Part 2 as we continue our study. Good day.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch y'all on our next podcast.